In the early 19th century, a slave rebellion shook the foundations of the southern United States. The man at its helm, Nat Turner. Born into slavery in 1800 in Virginia, Nat Turner was no ordinary man. He was deeply religious and believed he was chosen for a great mission. Turner often had visions which he interpreted as messages from God, driving him to fight for freedom. In 1831, he led a courageous rebellion that lasted 2 days and shook the nation. Despite its brutal end, Turner's rebellion sparked a nationwide debate about slavery. His actions intensified the abolitionist movement, pushing the nation closer to civil war. Nat Turner, a man who, despite the consequences, rose up against injustice.
Now, there is a lot of information going on right now about Nat Turner, and this is interesting to me because he was one of the people that I wrote essays about in my high school years. What I find interesting is, the most interesting is some of the people who are saying that they ate Nat Turner. That part is suspect. Now, I can tell you what they did do, what we do know for a fact, what was done to his body. But first, before I get there, let me just say that I believe that the Nat Turner rebellion was also inspired by the 1804 rebellion in Haiti, which the Haitians were able to gain their freedom. And that type of information was able to spread into the Americas because many of the slave owners after that time frame began to look for the slave Bible. And Nat Turner, who was originally allowed to read the Bible, was only allowed to read certain aspects of it. And those aspects being the parts that says slaves be good to your masters, whether they are good or bad, things of that nature, as you would unto the Lord. That way that the slaves would stay in line with what the master wanted them to know and learn. But it is through his reading of more information about Exodus that gave him the higher degree of inspiration. Now, what many people also may not know about Nat Turner is that he believed that he was receiving messages from God as far as when he was supposed to spark his revolution. As a matter of fact, on the day that he began his the day he began to go ahead and say we're going to do this thing, is that there was an eclipse that occurred. And during that eclipse, he saw that as a sign from God that he was supposed to go out there and start this revolution. Now, he went out there, they killed the family of his master, killed the whole family, the infant, the 9-year-old child, the wife, the husband, everybody, right? And then they went and they freed 75 other slaves. Well, they freed more than 75 other slaves, but 75 of them joined his rebellion. They quickly got a militia up, and the militia, and some people wonder, well, how could they have defeated them? Because there's one stupid ass black dude who's saying that it's impossible for them to have brought up a militia that fast. He really doesn't understand history. But how could they got a militia up, and within 2 days of fighting, because they had guns and they had hatchets, Nat Turner and them had hatchets, they were able to defeat this rebellion within 2 days. But they didn't capture Nat Turner for at least 2 months later. Now, over 50 people were executed because of this revolt. But it did spurn the more discussions about slavery between the North and the South, and it did push the abolitionist movement. But one of the other things that it did, it caused for laws to be put on the books where slaves were now, it was illegal to educate a slave, for a slave to be able to read, which demonstrates that the power of reading frees the mind. That if you keep people away from books, keep people away from knowledge, then you can maintain a better level of control over them. So many states decided that it was illegal to educate a slave after the Nat Turner rebellion. So back to the part about them eating his body. It was well known that his body was given to science, that medical science, that a medical school, a doctor bought his body for $10. He claimed that Nat Turner had sold his body to him, and they bought his body and they dissected him. Parts of his body was cut off and given to white families as souvenirs. His skin was filleted and made into souvenir purses, and it's possible, not 100% sure, that his body was also boiled and made into grease to be used for cooking. So that is one of the ways the whole consumption idea is out there. But we don't have factual proof of that. Information is more anecdotal, so we don't necessarily know. The New York Times back then had reported some information about it, but we don't know if it was also used as propaganda. But we do know that his skin was made into purses and his body was dissected by the medical science of the day. We know that his skull, was also given to the mayor of Gary, Indiana, who was going to make a civil rights museum. This is much later. This is like in 2002. But it was given back to the family, and the family now has it being tested for DNA to see if it's a match. I don't know if they finished that or not. I didn't even look it up. They might have finished that, and if it is his body, then they're going to have his remains buried. There's another person who does claim they have the head of his head, but they haven't done DNA testing on that one, to my knowledge. But it's an interesting thing that people are like, they ate him. Now, consuming of slaves in the South and during slavery in America, it is something that you can find elements of. It wasn't widespread, but it is something that people did do. Just like they also drank the blood and the menstrual blood and things of that nature because they believed that it had medicinal purposes. So there's a lot that if you go and study it. So don't allow for them to take away the knowledge. Don't allow for them to take away the books. You see what they did by what the Americans did at that time frame. They made laws, and that's one of the things we should pull from this. They made laws so that the slave could not read. Because as Julius Caesar said, the moment a slave begins to think critically, he will no longer desire to be a slave. So, and like Gandhi said, the moment a slave decides he is no longer a slave, the shackles fall off, because it is in the mind that you become a slave. And there are many of us who are still slaves today. Slaves to the different cultures, slave to our upbringing, slave to whatever we think is our place in this world. And your place in this world is whatever you decide what your place in this world is. So always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.